corner, Joey.
Waz, it's been a long time since we've talked to you last for fall ball. Just after all this time, just where have you seen some improvements overall on the team with the new faces?
Yeah, no, we're excited to get going. First and foremost in the weight room. Our guys have done a really nice job committing in the weight room, and I think from a physicality standpoint, it'll be the first thing that somebody who walks out of the ballpark for the first time sees. It's a good-looking group of athletes, and I credit to my assistant coaches for doing a good job recruiting guys that are fast and can hit the ball over the fence and do a lot of things, and so that's fun. Just overall team chemistry, I think, too. You know, when you look at what we were able to do from then to now, I think we've really been able to kind of come together really well, and it's a fun group of guys to be with.
Along those lines, from last year's team, who's made a few players who've made some noticeable improvement?
Well, Logan Mercado on the pitcher's mound has really stood out. He's done very, very well, as has a kid that redshirted last year, basically. The Hughes kid on the mound has really been tremendous lately. Those two guys on the pitching side of it have really kicked up their game at a high level. And then positionally, Gavin Grant, moving over from second to short, has handled it extremely well at shortstop. He's played very well. The other guy is Shade. Colby coming back off of a shoulder injury. We were concerned about if he was going to be ready and teed up, ready to go. He is, and he looks really good. And then the other guy, who's probably like 32 years old by now, but Tanner Smith has really made some tremendous gains in the weight room and with this game, and seeing the ball come off of his bat this year is a little different than it has been in the past, which is nice.
Talked a little bit in the fall was about adding left-handed arms, and you added almost half a dozen compared to a year ago. We only had two guys. Now that you had fall ball and close to the season now, have any of them carved out roles by way of more likely to be a starter, more likely to be a reliever kind of guys, where you just have a lot more options now than a year ago you had two guys in bullpen?
Yeah, too early to tell with stuff like that. There are some movement in one direction or another with guys, but I guess you're kind of getting ahead of my speech today when I get a chance to see our guys, and that's, nothing is set in stone out here. And so, and that's good news, because from a depth standpoint in the field, there's guys pushing everybody at every spot. Same thing on the mound.
What initial thoughts on the rotation of what who some of the candidates would be?
Way too early to tell with anything right now.
Going off the pitching, there's a report that Isaac Aon was hurt. Do you have a status on him or an update on that?
Yeah, he got dinged up at the end of the fall. That's true. We're hoping to get him back for the stretch run our stretch run in the season. Again, too early to tell with that, but still, he got a little dinged up middle of the fall, I would say, and so hopefully we'll get him back for the end of the year.
Who's impressed with some of the new guys that we haven't seen? You want to name a few or not?
Well, in the outfield, Owen Diodati, big, strong kid from Alabama transfer, has looked exceptional. Mason Lytle, center fielder from San Jack. Tom Arrington runs a really good program at San Jack Junior College down in Houston. He's come in with Sabine Ceballos as a corner guy. He plays, he catches, he pitches, he plays third, first, he plays everywhere. He'll probably be out there playing shortstop today. He's big, strong, physical kid from Puerto Rico. He can really swing a bat. Those guys have looked tremendous. Dominic Hellman, freshman, Drew Smith, freshman. Several freshmen have really jumped off the page. There's a lot of new guys there's a reason why people have said this recruiting class is really good, and they're showing it. So there's a lot of new faces that are making a big impact out there right now.
You mentioned Grant moving to shortstop. Is that it? Is he going to be the opening day shortstop, or is that still a competition?
Still a competition. Yeah.
Who else is in there?
Well, you've got Drew Calley has been tremendous at short. Dominic Hellman's played very well at short for a freshman, and so is Carter Garotti, who's a freshman. Those four guys, probably one of those four guys will jump out there and be the guy. At second base, a new guy from Japan named Riku Nishida. Led the Cape Cod League in stolen bases last year and was an all-star in the Cape Cod League. He's jumped off the page at second base and done real well. He's in a battle right now with Towns King, that was a transfer portal guy from graduate transfer from Samford University, where he hit a lot of home runs and was a really strong player for them for years. So it's been fun being out at the ballpark. There's a lot of competition.
Going back to Cali for a minute, I understand junior college transfers are just, it's part of the world, but like a player who stands out by that way statistically, kind of begs the question, like, how do you end up there in the first place? So, how,
Yeah, the kid
how
who
did
was
that all-
leading
yeah.
the kid who was leading the country in hitting halfway through the season. Yeah, and he's back with us as a fifth-year senior or sixth-year senior, whatever he is. Tremendous kid, works his tail off, and it was a fluke injury. It was a hamate bone, and that happens ironically to a lot of guys that bat one way and throw the other. And so him being a left-handed hitter, right-handed throw guy, maybe more inclined, I guess, medically for that injury to happen to him. And he hurt it opening weekend of the Pac-12, and so that put him back. We got him back at the end of the year a little bit, as we saw, but he wasn't healthy until probably August, fully healthy. And so to have him back, we weren't counting on that, last year, especially when he got off to the start that he did. And so for him to be in the mix and doing things is awesome.
But going back to his high school days, was there something injury related? Was it just wasn't quite fully developed to that point yet? How did somebody with that kind of skill and ability now, these years later, end up where he ended up?
Good question. There's good players at other levels, and I guess that the portal, that's probably one of the things I like about the portal, is a kid that maybe at a smaller level and wants the bigger lights or something like that, and he's good enough now that they're given an opportunity. I don't like it for other reasons, but we won't get into that. But for Drew, it's given an opportunity to do what he wants to do, and that's see if he can compete against the best players in the country at the college level, and he's obviously held his own very well.
Was the catching position pretty good with Josiah and Bennett, or you got anybody else challenging?
Yeah, we've got a couple of guys there challenging. Anson Arrows was a redshirt last year. He was the second-rated prospect out of the state of California coming out of high school. He's a switch hitter that's really good, and he's caught very well. And Chase Meggers redshirted last year. His dad played a lot of professional baseball, and he's a good one too, left-handed hitter from Northern California.
Being a switch hitter, you might platoon a little bit, left-handed hitter and right-handed.
He can really, Arrows can really hit. They're all,
Yeah.
It's a heck of a battle at the catching position. And, Ceballos is our fifth catcher, and in some years you would really be thrilled to have him as your second catcher. He's that good. So he was drafted by the Angels last year as a catcher.
How do you keep them all happy?
Well, that's
Tough.
With rotation struggling at points last year, especially after Meyer went down, just what have you and Angier gone through to try to alleviate some of those issues and make your staff the strong part of your team?
Yeah, it's a good question. The good news, the first thing is with recruiting. We've tried to really recruit well at the high school level, and we were able to get some high school freshmen in that are really talented kids. Matthew Grabman from Canada, Turner Spoljarek from Canada. Those two guys are, Canadian team members. They're well traveled on the international scale in the international competition and stuff like that. So there's some polish to those guys, which is great, and they have great arms. But we've really just tried to nail it with recruiting, and then do a good job of being patient with some of the guys like Hughes. His brother was really a carbon copy of him going into Gonzaga at the same time, and he ended up being a high first-round pick last year out of Gonzaga. And so just staying patient, letting time take its course, and letting guys really kind of develop. And then some veterans, Matt Dallas has come back, and he's thrown the ball exceptionally well. He's been fantastic. Stone Cherby's been really, really good. And so just kind of being patient and letting guys maybe get through the first year in our program and see what they have to offer after they start getting their feet more comfortable in the dirt.
With the NCAA changes, I realize it's going to be a couple months, but initial thoughts of who the additional assistant will be with the changes that are forthcoming? Or
No, too early to tell all that kind of stuff. I love my staff. I would, I haven't even had discussions with our administrations about funding of the staff positions now that are allowed. From what I understand, at each institution, and maybe ours is unique, but maybe not. From what I understand, the new rule change doesn't just impact baseball.
Yeah.
It impacts all sports, which would be in the neighborhood of like 22 positions just at Oregon. And so, just at a minimum type salary, you're probably looking at incurring a pretty big chunk of money that I'm glad that's not on my desk of things that I got to figure out. So, the administration's always told us point blank they were going to do everything possible to be able to keep our program at the very top and funding all the way through, and they have. They've been awesome. Rob Mullins, Eric Rodell, been great.
And on the personnel side, the adjustment do you like the change that basically softball's falling in line with you guys as opposed to if you guys could have gone to what softball is doing in terms of the mid-year transfer where that's just not permissible, where like we talked about before, where it's not permissible in December, but for softball it was until next year. Like, would you have preferred it to go their way as opposed to?
Well, and from
your
what
way?
I understand, they got a heck of a pitcher out of the deal this year that's going to probably
Right.
help them quite a bit. I don't like the mid-year transfer. I think that is a nightmare. You know, to have somebody stick around for all fall long and then all of a sudden they can jump ship and go to another program freely and play mid-year. I don't like that on a lot of levels, and so I'm glad that maybe that isn't going to come into our game. But still yet, the NCAA is going to do what they are going to do and make the changes they think are going to improve our game.
Are there any other players similar to Aon who might miss the start of the season and then maybe come back later? Or, like, what's the injury report if you want to get into it?
No, I hope not. You know, we're trying to keep it as healthy as possible. I mean, there's guys, you know, just like any locker room, there's guys with nicks and stuff like that. But I hope not. I hope we can start the year healthy and finish strong.
When we went through the shortstop competition there, you've named a lot of guys. Just how have the competitions been all fall, and then what are you looking for in these next couple of weeks of practice before the season starts?
I think it's tough for the players sometimes because now with the increased media attention in our game, the game's more popular, but with media attention comes a lot of preseason projections, and those can come across like decisions are made. And that would be the worst thing for anybody, specifically in our locker room with the depth we have. To read into any of those publications, as good of a job as they do, it's still based off of stuff that basically has been projected before we even start our full weeks of practice. We don't start our first official practice until the 27th by rule. So to make projections before 3 weeks of competitive games and scrimmages and all the practices with team is really early. And so for guys to read into positions of where publications may have would be a mistake. And what I'm looking for is the guy that's the hungriest guy, that's the most complete player to help you win games. Not the most maybe talented or projection guy, but the guy that's going to help you win right away.
You've covered about every position, maybe first base. Jacob Walsh, how's he doing?
Boy, Jacob looks really good. He's big and physical. You know, Dominic Hellman's getting run over there. He's a, you know, young kid, freshman. He's only about 6'5" or 6'6", and he's got tremendous power. And Drew Smith's over there, so is Sabine Ceballos. There's, you know, when drafted players are, you know, not just being absolutely inked into starting positions, that's a good sign for the recruiting. And I credit, again, Jack and Jake Angier, Jack Marner, Jake Angier, for helping us get to that point. So, you know, it's been a fun, competitive spirit out there on the field.
You mentioned kind of on an individual player basis, but for the entire team, how do you manage kind of renewed preseason expectations that you guys have now?
Well, that's what we signed up for, and we want to get them better, you know, and so whatever the expectations are now, I mean, they should be to get to the College World Series, and you got to catch some breaks when you get there. But, you know, having guys, energy guys like Tyler Gannis that have been moving around the field and are great locker room and clubhouse guys, that's where a guy like Tyler Gannis is absolutely valuable beyond belief, to be able to just keep, you know, guys grounded in the fact that the team's first. And so where Tyler's competing for probably 6 spots on our field to start as well, and he's bigger and stronger and more physical, you know, his value in the clubhouse and the locker room with what you guys have talked about is really important.
Thanks, boss.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks guys.